Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Shill and Chill. I am Jam Creates. This is my channel. We're hanging out tonight with, as usual, RC Gates and Clint the Impaler tonight. We've got Clint Stoker. He's going to talk about Downcast and Fatal and all the other good stuff he's got going on. So before we get into that, let's all get chill. We'll get in the island mood. See, isn't that so much better?
Love it. Did you film that B-roll yourself?
No, okay. I wish.
I was imagining you going to the ATM like, I need 20 $100 bills, and then going right back to the bank after you
No. That was all. I found all that stuff online.
That makes yeah.
Even though I was gonna actually use some footage I shot from when we went on vacation in Hawaii for the beach stuff, but it was a lot of it like I filmed with my phone, so it's like just too jiggly. I'm like, that's annoying. It needs to be still. Like,
I was gonna go the opposite way. I thought you brought the $100 out for that.
Yeah, no. Well, listen, it was more than $100 to go to Hawaii. That's for damn sure. And we got a bunch of people hanging out in the chat. That's good to see. Dojo Kun Comics is here. Matanui, how you doing? Chimera, Mr. SOS himself, working on Testament right now. El Crudo issues 1 through 4. I think 4 is up right now on Indiegogo. Great series if you haven't checked that out. And so let's get into it. We are here hanging out, and we're here with Mr. Clint Stoker, also known as Sweetcast. He's got a great YouTube channel. By the way, anything we're going to talk about today about Clint's projects, links are all in the description down below, so you can always just check them out yourself. That's kind of why we're here. So why don't we just first off just remind everybody, if you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe. If you're not new to the channel, just hit that thumbs up button. You can hit the thumbs down button too if you want. It doesn't really matter. Like, it's all good. It doesn't. Interaction is interaction.
Yeah, it all works the same.
Exactly. We got Itchy5 in the chat. What is up, Total Excellence? Guess what's up, Total Excellence people out there if you're watching. Maximum Excellence. Okay, even better. I don't know. Is that better? Maximum or total? It's kind of the same thing, I guess.
We had to flip a coin. I think.
So that's the usual stuff. Like I said, check out indiecomics.underground.com. That's my website dedicated to indie and crowdfunded comics. You can get all kinds of info there, interviews, exclusive art, all kinds of cool stuff hanging out down there. So for that, let's just get into it. Oh, Bianca Fights the Zombies is here. Aloha. Yes, aloha.
Hey, Bianca.
I always go to do it, and I go to do it with my left hand, and it's like off the screen. Like, I should do it with this hand. Like, it just always works out that way. Didi Ramey is here. How are you doing? So let's get into it. Clint, first and foremost, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So you've got a lot of irons in the fire. Well, not really. You've got a couple irons in the fire right now.
Yeah, it's like you trying to get more is like, I have a feeling that this is what they talk about when it's hard to break into comics, but it's even harder to stay in. Mm-hmm. I think that absolutely applies to indie comics too, because it's like, what's the next thing? You gotta, especially if you're a writer. I think if you're an artist, it might be a little different, I suspect. But it's like you're trying to diversify what you're doing. So this is just the beginning of it. I'm learning, like everyone else.
Right. Well, one thing I will say, you have your YouTube channel. Everybody can check that out for sure. Sweetcast is the YouTube channel. One of the things I appreciate that you do on there is you will do a lot of videos where you're kind of working out sometimes you'll just do a video where you're working something out, but you're doing it in front of everyone.
Yeah, I do that. It might not be the best idea all the time, but but I think the kind of content that I was hungry for when I was like trying to get into comics years ago was the nuts and bolts of like how do you go about doing this? What's
right.
And so to me, I don't know if it makes for the most interesting video content, but people that are watching my videos, I think they get where I'm coming from, and it's I don't know. I think there's a lot of items that a lot of people are thinking about, considering, and I don't know. I think my channel is a good place to do that kind of stuff.
Well, I think I personally like it. I appreciate it. I like watching your videos, especially when you're doing that kind of stuff, because it makes me think. And I feel like that's kind of one of the things that Comicsgate in general kind of is. It's everybody working stuff out and figuring things out, and everybody going, you know what, that sounds good, but I tried that. This works better, and like it's kind of everybody working together to figure out what does work. And then obviously some things are going to work better for some people than they do for others, just depending on who you are and what your background is and that kind of stuff. I see Dojo Kun says, yes, the behind the scenes stuff is interesting. And yes, we're all going through this too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, that's one of the cool things I think about CG is just everybody is willing to help everybody else.
Yeah, there's no I don't have any trade secrets. And I don't think anybody. I think that's true across the board. Like there's no none of this is rocket science, you know what I mean? There's not it's as much of an art. It's probably more of an art than it is a science. But there are definitely those science elements to it that you got to make sure that you have down, your bases covered. But a lot of it's just, man, learning and then trying to figure out what's next. And that's been a lot of what's been on my mind is what's next. Like, how do you continue and grow and all this stuff. And so to me, it's good to put it out there. And the cool thing and interesting thing is I think most people that are watching my videos or buying my books also have at least a little bit of a desire to make their own books eventually, which is kind of interesting when you think about it. It's like when people are going to the movie theater, I think it's a very small number of people that have dreams of making their own film someday. But in comics, it's just such a high percentage. In Comicsgate, I think it's an even higher percentage. So it's like we're kind of all working through the same stuff. There are definitely people out there that are just here to get comics, and that's great. But yeah, I don't know what the exact percentage is, but it is interesting. So I don't know. I think it's better to just be transparent and talk through what you're doing.
Right. Yeah, I do agree though. There's definitely a huge percentage of the CG people who are backing books are a lot of them are people who are either in the process or are looking in the future to make their own comic.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But I think some of that comes down to just so many people feel just so let down by what comics has been in the last few years.
Yeah.
That it no, go ahead.
I didn't mean to cut you off at all. Sorry.
Oh, okay. No.
It's like you can't, for me anyway, when I first heard about it, I was like, I have to do something. I mean, I had been seeing the content of the comic books going down, and I remember Googling, are there any conservatives? Not that you have to be a conservative, but for me as a conservative, I thought, are there any conservatives that work in comics? I remember Googling that. And I could not find any like clear answers at the time. This was a while ago,
right?
But it just seemed like a place that wasn't for you, And I for a minute I kind of bought into the lie that, well, conservatives just aren't that creative. There's just not that. There's something, you've heard that like there's just something creatively inferior about conservatives, which is a lie. But for some reason that gets perpetuated, I think all throughout entertainment, and that's how you can justify the disparity in all sorts of creative fields. And so seeing like, you know, the lawsuit, I think like a lot of people, so it was your boy Zach and Nick Ricada that got me interested in Comicsgate. I started making videos then. And I felt compelled to do something, and I didn't know what to even do at the time. I remember emailing Richard Meyer, and I said, hey, if you need, I don't even know what, but maybe an editor or proofreader, like I just want to help, like with your mission, what you're trying to do here. And then now the logical conclusion is that you can do something. Making a book, while it's hard, it's not at all impossible. It's very doable. So there, it feels like you can direct that desire to change things into a productive path.
Right. Well, and I think comics is one of the few areas where that can actually be done. You know, something like you said, like movies, even if you do have that dream when you go to the movies of making your own movies one day, making movies takes a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of technical know-how, and a lot of people.
Yeah. and the risk that, you know, part of the reason that we're getting all these remakes is because they're trying to minimize risk. Right. So it's like you have this franchise, you can just make another Ghostbusters movie, you know, and it doesn't, if the Ghostbusters name's on it, that already has limited the risk that you're going to take at the box office. Right. If it's like Ben Shapiro now is the plan is he's going to make movies, and to me that's the closest thing to what we're doing. Right. You know, that is going to happen in film. And I can't even imagine, like the one that they released already was already a made movie. It's not like it was produced specifically out of this. So the next time it's like, they got to raise enough money somehow. I don't know, maybe, yeah, I'm sure they have money, more resources than we do, but it's just a massive risk because you're starting, it's always going to be new IP. It's, you know, starting fresh and hoping for the best. And I hope it works out, but comics is unique that way. It's, it can be a risk, but there's tons of ways to minimize that risk.
Sure. And there's, and like I said, with the, you know, when it comes to comics, there's less people needed in the process than making a film, obviously. You know, I mean, so in some cases, it's literally just one person.
Right.
You know,
absolutely.
Not always, obviously, but a lot of times, you know, there are times when it's one person, they do everything, and that's that, you know. In other cases, go ahead.
Sorry, I keep cutting you off.
It's all good. It's all good.
It's like looking at making a movie. It's like the budget. You look at food. I didn't think about that. Yeah. If you're hiring a cast of people, you have to have food in your budget. Like, how are you going to feed people that are working? How long? How many hours are you going to spend on it? Comics, you work through it. You can have a full-time job and do comics. It's going to affect how quick, you know, your turnaround time is. But
sure,
Downcast is 3 people plus editors, but really, essentially, it's me, Nacho, and then Eric Weathers is doing the lettering. That's it.
Right.
So that, I don't know, that really is the most streamlined. If it's for a writer, that's as streamlined as you can get. If you're an artist doing everything yourself, you have the power.
It just, of course, with everything going on right now, the first thing that pops in my head when you say you have the power, of course, is, you know, man.
Likewise here.
But I swear I will not talk about that. That's it's funny, actually. That's one of the things. Before we get into talking specifically about your books, that's another thing that I noticed. Like I try not to do this on my channel. I know you don't really do a lot of it on your channel either, is giving a ton of oxygen to the crappy books that are coming out through the mainstream. I always feel, and this is just me, you can tell me if you agree or disagree or whatever. For me, I felt like I could have started a channel and I probably would have grown much faster. Now, I've been doing this channel for a few years at this point, and I'm still only at, 430 something subs. However, I felt like it was important to me not to do like roast videos and things like that, because all I'm doing is just giving more exposure to the crap. So I went the other route and decided, well, I'm just going to review the cool indie books that I get, and I'm going to talk about those. because instead of shining a light on something that you don't want people to buy, let's shine a light on stuff that we want people to see.
Yeah. That's a really nice high road position. And my motivations have been a little bit more complicated with as far as YouTube content goes. But I've thought, you look at the roast videos, and that's really, if you boil it down, that's why Comicsgate exists.
Sure.
That simple of a format. But I'm not very good at it. I just don't care, and I don't want to buy Squirrel Girl comics.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, so that's definitely a big part of it. But then there's like, even when it comes down to industry news, which is usually what I'm talking about,
right,
more the industry level kind of stuff. And it's like, you can look at two different articles. The one that makes everyone upset is gonna get more views. And so I do those videos. Absolutely, I get it.
Right.
That's the reason my channel is whatever it is as far as growth has gone. But at the same time, you do have to show, the point is to have an alternative, you know what I mean? And you can't, I don't know, for me, it just gets old being upset. I can't hold a grudge that long, especially against companies that don't care about me anyway. So it's like, why waste your time?
Right.
So it's like, you gotta, there's definitely a balance of growth, because that people are going to resonate with video content, but you also have to sleep at night. So it's like, if you're doing something positive that makes you happy, that's a good place to be. So
yeah, I think part of it, like I said, I didn't want to get into the roast video thing. Part of it was because I wanted to shine the spotlight on others, but the other part of it is a very practical reason. There are other people doing it already, and they're doing it better than I would be able to do it. So like, why would I even try that?
Yeah. Yeah, if I tried to, Yellow Flash's videos when he would stab books and stuff, it's like I just wouldn't be able to pull that off very well. So it's like, yeah, it's already being done way better than I could even approach it. So I'll let it be.
Right. And I also feel in a little, to a sense, I feel like also a lot of this stuff has led to, I mean, it was going on for so long that at some point, when do you just stop being angry about it? Just be at peace with it. It's terrible, and move on, and just leave it in your rearview mirror.
Yeah.
And you just basically become apathetic to it, and you just don't even feed into it. And I think a lot of people are starting to come around to that way of thinking, because I'm noticing every time there's this new announcement that is clearly made to anger people, I see less and less people even bothering to get angry.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's intentional. They know what they're doing. The companies know what they're doing.
Right.
And if they can't, you can't kill off Superman again and again. Right. Like you can't do things like that get people talking, but you can delve into the culture war topics, you know what I mean, and make people upset. I think part of it, I don't know, I have to think about it. It's like self-reflection, like how much of this is my fault because I've been reacting how they want me to react, depending on what the situation is. And so, yeah, it's like, I don't know, Kevin Smith or whatever. He hasn't been relevant in a little while.
Right.
So it's almost like if you just ignored him, maybe he wouldn't be getting work anymore. Maybe that would be the nail in the coffin. I don't know. Like it's hard to say. I think it would take some time, but I think you're right. People are starting to. You just see it too many times. It's energy to care.
Exactly. It very much reminds me, at least for myself. I'm a parent, and you. I mean, if you have kids or if you're around kids, even kids will act, especially when they're younger and they're figuring things out. They will act out, either to get something that they want or to get attention or whatever it might be. And eventually, as a parent, you start to realize if you react to it in a way that gives them the attention or bribing them to give them what they want, or any of that, like really any reaction, they're going to learn, okay, this gets me something. It gets me, whether it's a reaction or a thing I was asking for or whatever, it's getting me something. They will continue to learn that this is how I get what I want. And I kind of feel like it sounds, it sounds almost reductive, but a lot of these people they're children. They act like children.
Yeah.
And so when they do throw their temper tantrums and stomp their feet to make you mad, if you just go, all right, we'll see you later, and you just do that thing that parents do where they just kind of walk away, like, I'm going to leave you here in the store to throw your fit and I'll see you later, and then the kid realizes, like, oh crap, they're not coming, like, and then they run after the parent. Like, if you do that to these people enough, like, they start to just get left behind.
Yeah. And then, like, oh, little Johnny over here, good job, man. You did your chores, little Johnny, good job.
Right.
And then, so it's like exactly what you're saying is looking at, hey, these indie comics are doing something great. We're going to look at these, and the more reward, and the reward right now is attention. So the more attention you give to things that you like that are working, that's definitely the positive way to go.
Right. Fizchozo says hello.
Hi, Fizchozo.
So let's get into the actual books here. So right now you've actually got 2 books on Indiegogo. Let's start with Downcast, because that's the one that's actively funding at the moment. Downcast 3 Submerged. The interesting thing here, this is obviously the 3rd one. I'll bring up the campaign so we could show everybody. This is the 3rd, obviously, hence the 3. In the Downcast series. Now, the interesting thing with this is in demand right now. So for those who don't know, Indiegogo campaigns have an active campaign, and then they go into an in demand, which is essentially a store. You can keep backing them the way you would normally, pretty much. It just allows people to continue to back after the active campaign is over. So Downcast 3, right here, this is what I wanted to start off with, is you've got the new readers perk right here.
Yeah.
So obviously this is the 3rd book. One of the first questions people are going to have is, well, if I didn't read the first 2, can I read this one? And here you go.
Yeah, the answer's no. And the more I thought about this, it's like if I was doing a Spider-Man book, because Spider-Man is so just embedded in culture, people kind of know how Spider-Man came about. They have an idea of what his abilities are. If you're a brand new Spider-Man reader, you could get some kind of a trade paperback or graphic novel that had some kind of a starting point for a story arc, and you'd get it. In this case, with Downcast, the first 2 volumes are one full story arc. Right. And so I think that's essentially the origin, and it's pretty important. The way that I'd love to build this series out is to have basically you need to know the origin, but I've got all these other elements that kind of feed into it. Like, I'd love to do a book that's just on the Monstro, which is this diver character.
Mm-hmm.
And you could just start with that one. But if you want to continue through the series, you got to get to the Downcast 1 and 2, because it just sets up everything for how this is all working. So but I had to do a reprint at a necessity, just because of I sold out of volume 1s. That's what it came down to. So I thought it was a good opportunity to just combine them together, and that does a few things for me. If you have one of those volume 1s, they're sold out. I don't have any more, so I have, I think, 2 copies left is what it'll end up being. So they're sold out. That's great for those people that are interested in scarcity. But then with this reprint with 1 and 2, it makes it a graphic novel that's, it's comparable in length to a graphic novel you'd buy anywhere else. It's 120 pages, and you could price that so that it's competitive. Like, this is sort of where you get into, hey, I could throw this up on Amazon, and it would be priced similarly to graphic novels that length, and get people that aren't early adopters, or whatever. So it's definitely lagged behind as far as release schedule goes, but I think this is the first step toward, like, this could be the next step, combining these volumes into larger books and getting them out there, sort of like the DVD release.
Right. And then you've actually got what's interesting is you've actually got another route going as well. Like, so you've got the idea of, like you said, you could combine these books into giant volumes that people could pay a premium for, but you've also got the deal with Alterna Comics.
Yeah.
And so you've got Downcast coming out as floppies through Alterna. So far, only issue 1 has come out. Issue 2, I know Peter's been having all kinds of issues with the printer and stuff. He just posted something today, I think, or yesterday, about finally getting things going again, which is nice to hear.
I'm looking forward to it. Should be soon, like really soon. Issue 2 is going to come out.
But yeah, you've got them coming out through Alterna as well. So anyone who misses out on the bigger volumes, or maybe doesn't have the money for the bigger volumes, can buy. I mean, through Alterna, you're talking about, what is it, $2 a book?
Yeah.
Those are fantastic. That's one I love alternative books. I absolutely love them. I've had the everything subscription for. He didn't do it again this year because of all the issues, but the previous 2 years I had the everything Alterna subscription going, so I would get everything that they were putting out, and I loved it. I think it's great.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that once everything gets back to normal, he'll start doing that subscription again in the future.
I would bet that he does. I don't know for sure. I'd have to ask him, but
right.
I would bet that he does. I think it's been, such a weird year, but at this point we were supposed the initial schedule was to be finished with the first 4 issues of Downcast. Like with Alterna, they'd be all shipped at this point. But stuff happens. I especially understand with printers, like it gets weird sometimes. But yeah, so I've heard people, complain like crowdfunding comics are expensive. Then it's not for everybody to be the early adopter. Like if you're specifically looking at it at a price thing, but when it comes to Alterna, that you can't make that argument. If you want to get Downcast and you get the Alterna versions, I'm happy about that. That's great. That doesn't make me feel bad at all. That's great. If you want to get the crowdfunded versions, that's awesome. That's what helps me. That's what makes it all happen. And then these larger reprints, they're just a necessity. They will happen clearly. But I'm trying to find a home for those. And how do I, I do have a website, but how do I keep getting those out? So I don't know, you put so much work into making these comics. And to me, most of my backers, or at least how I feel, is when I'm backing a campaign, you're hoping that it shoots to the moon. You're hoping that it becomes something. You were there first,
Right.
And so I really think of it as my responsibility to try and push it. And it's, especially when I believe in it. I really think this Downcast 3 people are going to love. It was so fun to write. I love this book. But getting it out there and just trying to see like how far can I push this thing, that's the fun of crowdfunding, in my mind. Like I want to see all of these other IPs that I've been backing, like how big do they get?
Right.
How much reach do they have? That's exciting to me.
I think that's a big part of crowdfunding in general. Especially, when you're getting behind stuff and you think it looks cool, and then, you back it, and then you see more people getting behind you. Like, yes, see, more people think this is cool. This is great. Like, it's like, it's just that kind of momentum builds and everybody gets behind it and just wants to I mean, listen, in the early days, it was like ridiculous. With like the very first like Jawbreakers and stuff like that. Like in the early days, it was just insane the way things would just, fly through the numbers would just fly through the roof. But what I find interesting, and actually, Zach said something in a video, it might have been today even, where he was talking about how, because there's always he was saying in a response to people always saying like, oh, people are only backing these books because they want to, own the libs or whatever kind of nonsense. Yeah. And he was saying if that was true, then they would always get the same amount of backers. And he said in his campaigns very wildly, depending on which book it is, because people like one type of story over the other, one book over the other. They may have an attachment now to some of his characters. So that's what I think. Again, now you see people are picking and choosing what really does look interesting to them.
Yeah.
There's a lot more competition out there.
Yeah, there is. And it doesn't, that's a huge factor that you look at first, you think, hey, we've set up basically another industry that's operating at the same time
Right.
as the rest of comics. I mean, even you're just looking at independent comics. We've set up an industry over here that's doing its own thing. There are comics being sold elsewhere, sure, happening. We're competing with them as a whole, but within this section here, we're absolutely competing against each other, which, again, there's no trade secrets. I want everyone to do great, and succeed. But the way that you compete is trying to, stand out in their story and the art. And honestly, I really think doing a series is a good route to go, because that does factor in for people. I think I picked up so many new backers this time around. I think part of it was, okay, I can get 120 pages of stuff that's been done, plus another 60. How many pages is this thing? 80 pages. Another 80 pages here. And then it just, it becomes, I don't know, like something that substantial you can sink your teeth into. So there's I don't know. These are all factors. Again, I don't have any of the answers for any of this stuff, but that, in my mind, I do think that motivates people.
Now, as far as we didn't even get into.
We're talking business the whole time.
Yeah, no, it's whatever it is. It's fine. But we didn't even get into like the story itself. So for anybody out there who doesn't know, what can you give us just the quick, without trying to recap everything?
Yeah.
The quick rundown on what Downcast is.
Yeah. So there's two pitches. This is the best way I know to do it. So
okay.
Downcast, the series, it's about a couple of blue collar teens that work in a floating city in the sky. And they get the power to control gravity for 24 hours and immediately try to exploit that however they can to save their father from prison. So that's the first arc, that sets up everything. This is a brand new story arc, Downcast 3. It starts off with this character, the Monstro, who is looking for revenge on humanity. He's walked the ocean floor for hundreds of years. When he returns to the surface, he sees that humanity has abandoned the earth to live in the clouds, and so he goes up to the city of Strata to exact some revenge. So that's sort of the catalyst behind it. Lots of mystery. It starts off a brand new story arc, and very inspired by Daredevil. Frank Miller's run on Daredevil. I don't think you'd pick that up, but for me it was important. And so I'm glad, I don't know, Frank Miller's in the news right now, but this is definitely inspired by him, and just his every single issue being awesome. That's what I wanted to do. Like, look at what are the elements that I like in a comic book, and I want everything to be in here. So it's been really fun. I think people are going to love it. I'm getting really good feedback from beta readers already. It's finished. So I'm waiting for Indiegogo to send me the funds. That's all I need.
Yeah. So you're just waiting on funds so you can print.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. That's where I'm at right now. We've got extras and things. There's a lot of work that we're going through, but it's the art, story, lettering, it's finished. So it's a good place to be.
So now, when you approached doing Downcast 3, obviously, like you said, the first one, it was a story broken into two parts. Now, when you approach this one, now you know that you already have the deal with Alterna as well. Did that change the way you approached writing this one?
Yes. So I got the Alterna contract was signed after the volume 1, actually. So it's been a long time coming. And so the volume 1, I wrote through it and I thought I should probably break this up into 2 chapters just in case. It just made sense to me. So I broke it up into 2 chapters. Shortly afterward, I got the deal with Alterna, and then it made sense. I have a chapter break. So volume 2, I very much leaned into there being a chapter break from the beginning. And so there's again 2 issues within volume 2. This is volume 3, and it's broken up so that there are actually 3 issues. So there's more story content here that will actually be Downcast, comic book pages than there have been in the other 2 volumes. So it changed it in that way. I really leaned into the fact that this is a series. The fact that I have a publishing deal, I am not at all taking for granted. And so I want to make these read well if you are picking up any given issue of Downcast. So it definitely affects how you write it. And that's why I thought, what's the best way to do this? I'm going to look at Frank Miller and how he handled, that run on Daredevil, because it's great.
Yeah, no, I mean, I know, I like I said, I'm a fan of your channel. I watch your channel. I'm a subscriber. So I've seen you doing the videos where you were reading through Frank Miller's Daredevil run, and you were, reading through it and talking about it. So I know that was definitely important for you.
Yeah.
So now the one thing I have to say, and I know this comes up depending on whether or not people play video games or not. And I know you've gotten this question before, but I'm going to ask it again anyway.
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah.
BioShock.
Yeah, so this comes up every time. I've never played BioShock. But that doesn't really mean anything to anybody. It doesn't matter. So I actually got inspiration in one of the backup stories on Downcast 2, or in the Secret History Strata. It's like it's a backup story. It's a little different than, it's not a comic book. It's like a collection of journal entries. But there's this character that was, I don't want to spoil things, but he was thrown overboard and in a state that he won't die. So I thought they need to put him in something. Is it a coffin? I thought, a diving suit. And I actually speaking of video games, I got more of the inspiration from League of Legends. There's a character in League of Legends called Nautilus, who is a diver that uses an anchor as a weapon. And so I thought, cool character. They probably ripped that off from BioShock as well. But I guess there's divers in BioShock. I've since learned about it. There's even a floating city in BioShock.
Yeah.
That I can't even imagine how, because if I would have known that, I wouldn't have even, I feel like I would have had to have started over. You know what I mean? It's that similar.
Well, it's funny because you've kind of gone, obviously I know, like you said, it had no bearing on the creation, but it's actually kind of funny because in Downcast 1 you introduce Strata, which is the floating city, and then now in Downcast 3 you have this character who looks like a diver. Now that's really all it is when it comes to BioShock. Is just there's the big brothers. They look like they're in like diving suits, but they're huge. They have like drill arms, and like it's a whole different and there's an entire underwater city in the first BioShock, and that's where the whole thing takes place.
So the floating city comes later.
Yes. Well, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
You kind of flipped it in that the floating city in the sky, they call it Columbia in BioShock, was in BioShock. It was in the third BioShock game. And the underwater city was in the first 2 BioShock games.
Oh, that's interesting. There must be some kind of, I don't know. There's no way I can explain it other than you kind of know I didn't take inspiration from it, because if I did,
right,
I wouldn't have done it. It doesn't. It's way too close. But I don't know. Like the next one, does BioShock have kung fu in it? Because like the next story arc, I want to do a kung fu kind of related character, and I think I've got this killer idea for it. So that's sort of the plan for the next one, but. I don't know.
It's just just funny.
Absolutely, yeah. And I've heard it a lot. And after now Googling about it, I'm like, oh my gosh, what happened? Yeah.
Madanui said, I still say whoever came up with the name Big Daddy should have been fired on the spot. Yeah, they called them the diving guys. They were called the Big Daddies, and they had these other characters in the games who were these creepy little girls. And they called them the Little Sisters. So there was the Big Daddies and the Little Sisters. It's a creepy ass game, honestly. If you've ever played it, it's creepy.
I've heard it's great too, so I want to play it, but at the same time, I'm like, I'm afraid.
You're
I'm
almost
afraid
like I can't.
Yeah, if anybody saw me playing BioShock, then they'd be like, "Oh, see, that's where I got it from."
They'd be like, "You're busted, Clint."
Well, it's funny because in the first volume, people were saying Gravity Rush. Have you played Gravity Rush? Another game I'd never heard of, but it was, female character that can control gravity in a floating city. So, anyway, it's interesting, kind of like underlines like how original are my ideas? How original can you be?
Well, I was gonna say that's really more the question, because I mean, let's be honest, there's that statement that floats out there of just there is nothing original left.
Yeah.
Everything is just a remix now or whatever. I think that's true to an extent. I mean, listen, humanity's been around for a long time, and we've been telling stories from the time we learned how to speak. So,
this combination though hopefully will be I don't know, different in some way. Like I can imagine when people are reading through it, they're probably going to see that Downcast 3 has a lot more of a superhero vibe to it. It's not really a superhero book, but it feels, I think, a lot more like a superhero comic book kind of feel, and I really wanted to lean into that. So I think people will sort of get that, and I don't know, that it'll be an interesting flavor for this one.
Yeah, I just thought it was funny. I had to bring it up because obviously,
of course.
For anybody who's here who maybe hasn't heard you address that before, if they were thinking it, I figured we at least should touch on it.
Absolutely, yeah.
And now I know, I know you're a writer. However, I know you also draw. You just don't call yourself an artist.
I don't know at what point you become an artist. I don't know. I know in writing, like I'd always tell people, like I've got a guy in my neighborhood that is writing and he's learning. And I remember my writing mentor of sorts told me, once you start writing, you're a writer. So don't, because you're always worried, like, are you published versus self-published? And like, there's some kind of like, invisible line you have to cross to be a real writer. And I told him, if you're writing, you're a writer. Like, you get past that, you are a writer, but you're always going to be developing your craft. And I get that for art, it has to be the same way, that you're always developing the craft. But I don't. This is definitely me developing my craft. I'm drawing the backup story for this, which is terrifying for a few reasons, but I think a lot of people wanted to see me draw it for the novelty of, I don't know, me drawing it. So I did it. But we'll see how it turns out. It is fun though, and I'd love to draw my own book someday and just be a one-man show. That would be great. But we'll see. Who knows?
Right. Well, it's nice that you have the option now that you could do something like that, like just do a backup story on this already successful series you've got going.
Yeah, really. Trading cards are actually kind of expensive to produce for what they add to the campaign.
Right.
So it's like, because you could, depending on the artist, you're paying a lot of money for that the original drawing, and then you're giving it away for free in the campaign, essentially.
Right.
So it's really hard to determine, wow, what's worth it with a trading card. But in this case, it's like I drew the trading card set, and again, it's part of like, it's the novelty of Clint. You heard it back one of my campaigns, and I just figured, why not? I'll just try it, see what people think. And people, no complaints yet. They don't have the cards yet. They might complain when they get them, but that's, I think, part of the fun. That it's like, we're learning how to make comics, and
right.
So I don't know. We'll see. I don't know if I'll do it again, but I'll still be drawing, and I mean, I'd really love to just draw a whole book. I think that would be super fun.
It's definitely. I think part of it is also just the very nature of the way a lot of these books are getting done. In that, a lot of these books, especially, a lot of the CG books, a lot of them are built on people getting to know you as a creator, whether it's through YouTube or social media or whatever it might be. And then saying like, I watch this guy's videos all the time. I know he's trying to do this, like, and they're gonna look at the card and be like, "Hey, he did a good job on this." Like they're gonna like almost be like they're proud of you for doing it.
Yeah, it's funny. Like you get extra leeway, because people know. I'm sure there are backers out there that have no idea. They're unsuspecting victims that they'll just open up that pack of cards and be like, "What has he done?" But for the most part, they'd want. I don't know. It's just fun. I can't put my finger on exactly what it is, but that's what's so great about YouTube, and people get to know you. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And then they want to see what's it like if he puts out, and then maybe someone out there's like, oh, I could draw a trading card set. Then it's not a big deal, But we'll see if there's rioting. Then we'll know. I guess it was bad. It was not a good idea.
I don't think they'll be rioting.
That actually, I would take that if there was rioting. That would be that would move people.
Comics Mate says it is super fun, Clint, and stressful.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I know, like, just for me, I know, like, I'm working on my own stuff behind the scenes. Like we said, everybody who's in Comicsgate, almost everybody, is also eventually trying to do their own book. And I know the same is true for me. And I know the same is true. I'm not going to speak for you for RC, but I know the same is true for him as well.
Yep, that is true.
But yeah, no, it's just kind of it's just fun. It is stressful though, like you constantly question. And then, for example, when you see like you're working with Charlie Snogans on your other book that's also in demand, Fatal. And when you see his artwork,
that's intimidating.
Yeah,
I'll tell you that.
Like I would imagine.
He's something else. Yeah, this is just amazing. Every time I look at it, and I like think for a moment, like, holy cow, my name is gonna be on this book. It is wild. And I've seen many artists discouraged after seeing Charlie. It's funny how that works. Like, I'm sure many artists were inspired as well, but yeah, he's on his own level. I don't even know how to describe the greatness of Charlie Snogans, but he's amazing. And so it's been really cool to work with him and work on this book, get the book out there, get his name out there. He did work on a Jawbreakers backup story, to a lot of praise as well for that story, but this is a lot more substantial than a Jawbreakers backup. And I don't know, it's great stuff. It's cool to see like how the process has worked too, with him being such a hands-on creator. These were based off character designs that he drew. He started drawing action pages. He said, I have no plot. There's this action scene I see in my head. So we got together and I've been building this together, like stringing his ideas together into a coherent story. It's been really fun. I think people are going to love this book. But yeah, it's about a space exterminator that he's out looking for money. That's his job. And he goes to this planet that immediately he finds out he bites off more than he can chew. There are these mysterious aliens showing up. They don't know how they got there. And he's got to get to the bottom of it with the help of these what's a princess essentially on this planet and her bodyguard. So those are the other two characters there. And yeah, tons of fun. I think people are going to love this book. It's just crazy to think it's like we're less than $3,000 away from hitting $100,000 on this book. It's so wild.
Yeah, and so then basically so you guys kind of created this together then.
Absolutely. This is Marvel method. from the core. And I think it's probably more than that. It's not like, hey, here's an outline, here's my outline, Charlie, you draw it, and then I'll add dialogue. It's been a lot of back and forth and planning on, hey, let's do this. We need a character, or like the robot character. We need a character for him to talk to, because that's how you make a scene, is you have to have characters interacting.
Right.
And so it's like, I need one more character that's like his sidekick. So Eldridge, which is that floating round robot.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's how Eldridge was born. And Charlie just had so many ideas, and a lot of it was, hey, I have this vision of this great chase scene, and this is what's going to happen in the chase scene. I'm like, that's cool. Okay, so we already know that like there's plenty of reasons for him to be chased, and so it's sort of stringing these together. So it's my job to make order out of Charlie's creative chaos. That's the way that we've worked it. And so far, I think it's been working well. The book has been delayed because Charlie's had some personal family emergencies. It's been a really, really tough year for Charlie. But every time, he's working on it, and I see updates from him, and they're just amazing every single time. So I think people are going to love this book.
This is, I think, one of those cases where, honestly, if you want to sell someone on the book, you literally just show them the art.
Yeah.
And they just go, oh, okay, yeah, I get it.
Yeah. Any given page too tells story so well. Charlie's so good at storytelling on a page. Like he has the whole, each and every page is laid out in a very particular way so that it tells a story in and of itself, but together they all work. It's just, I don't know, like it just works so well. So it makes my job easier in a lot of ways. This method makes my job harder in a lot of ways, because I have to sort of change with, he'll have ideas of what he wants to draw. And when you're working with an artist at this level, I really am trying to make sure that he has his input and feels creatively free to just do his thing.
Right.
So I'm trying to, that's my goal, is to really support that and bring out the best story possible. So yeah, I mean, it's really cool, really great to be a part of this.
It's cool, just from a creative standpoint. By the way, Ryan Wynn is in the chat. He says, congrats, Clint.
Thanks, Ryan.
And he also said, bless the Snogan family. Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know, because I know I've seen the updates, so I know what was going on with Charlie's family. And absolutely. And that's the kind of thing, just to take a quick step aside, when you are backing a crowdfunding book, and a lot of people, we get a lot of new people coming in all the time, I feel like, into crowdfunding, and maybe they don't have a lot of experience with crowdfunding. And sometimes people start to complain about things, and you have to understand, like, as long as things are being communicated, most people are cool with it. If it's understandable. And I think it's hilarious because I'm coming from a background of, I was always a huge video game guy for years. I mean, I was always a comic book guy too, but I was always a big video game guy. And I have seen the absolute horrors that have happened in video game crowdfunding over the years.
Yeah.
And it makes me laugh when people started, like, when this whole thing kind of blew up and people started complaining about a book was a little bit late or whatever. And I was always just like, guys, you have no idea. Like, you're like a babe in the woods if you think this is bad. Like,
yeah, it's a book. So it's like, the assumption is like, well, this is a lot easier. I've heard people say, well, if the book is finished and you send it to the printer, how long should I possibly have to wait? Like, what could possibly go wrong? And in that phase, a lot can go wrong. And it's kind of some of the worst. This is why I pick US based printers, which I'm really glad I've done. But if you're printing overseas, you can have some absolute nightmares happen to you because of whatever the printer does, whatever freight does.
Right.
So they're definitely terrible things that can happen. So far, things have been going fine as far as that production level. It's really just been art production on Fatal that has been the delay. But yeah, that's part of crowdfunding, which is why once you get the books, I don't know, it's like that's why I want to get the books out to people, like through Alterna, and I'm looking at Amazon or other outlets like that, because you've done all this work and people invested money to make it happen. So I don't know, it really is an achievement. It's amazing that there's so many books that have come out.
Yes,
even at the time that they have. It's impressive.
That's kind of the thing that I've been trying to impress on people sometimes, is you don't understand the ridiculous success rate that Comicsgate and this group has when it comes to actually fulfilling their campaigns. Like it's insane, the amount of books that have been fulfilled.
And it's laughable when people will say, well, Comicsgate books are always late or never fulfilled. It's no, if you looked at any cross section of crowdfunded books anywhere, it's gonna be, you're gonna have books that never fulfill, even by pros. There's a huge list of those.
Oh yeah,
you're gonna have books that are extremely late, and I don't know how you could possibly look at the numbers, but if I were to guess, I would think that Comicsgate books, you probably actually have a better track record than your normal comic book. I can't prove that right now, but I would suspect so. And part of that's because the fan base is watching. You know, they want you to get those books out.
No, I 100% I would agree with that. I mean, I just think, just like you said, you've got, people who've been in the industry for years, and they've got unfulfilled campaigns that are just sitting there, literally some of them going on like almost 10 years of not having been fulfilled, like after they collected the funds.
Yeah.
Are there a couple of, high profile things that have happened in Comicsgate? Sure. But the fact that they were so high profile, and the fact that you can literally name them and count them on one hand, should tell you what a good track record this section of crowdfunding has.
Right. There are probably more articles written, more videos made. There's more accountability too for those books than you're going to get on whatever Rob Liefeld's thing. He finally fulfilled that, I think. Not to his backers, but to a convention, I think. So
yeah, no, I mean, it's insane when you stop and think of it. That's why I laugh, because I noticed, especially in the beginning of this, a lot of people were very clearly new to crowdfunding as a whole. Just from the things they would say and the reactions, I'm like, you haven't been paying attention, have you? Especially if, like I said, for me, I had watched the video game space very closely for a long time, and I had seen either the games be fulfilled and they're broken, the games completely just never get fulfilled, the games that get crowdfunded and then suddenly told, oh, well, you backed it so that you could play it on this system, but now it's not going to be available on that because we just got picked up by a different publisher. So now it's only going to be available somewhere else. So thanks for the money, but you'll never get the game.
I don't know, man. Yeah, crowdfunding has a super spotty record, but that's why, I think there's always room for improvement.
Sure.
You want things to be better, but it's really the reputation that people are attempting to sort of build. You see the narrative builders out there on Twitter or wherever that Comicsgate fails to, complete campaigns, and there's some kind of scam going on. It's just really, I have a ton of Comicsgate books.
Me too.
A ton of them. And I look through my unfulfilled campaigns, and the ones that aren't fulfilled, I'm actually not really worried. There's maybe one or two out there that I don't know if I'm ever going to get. But out of the dozens of books that I've backed, I'm not really too worried.
Yeah, no, I've got a couple that I look at and I go, well, maybe one day. I'm not quite sure. But there's a lot that I know are coming. They may be late, but I know they're still working because they keep updating. You know, they keep letting you know what's going on, and so you know what's happening, and it's eventually coming. And it's kind of just the nature of the beast. It's not, you can't, unfortunately, when you are crowdfunding, you can't just, it's not like something like just regular publishing where you could just make an announcement and say, and it'll be in stores on such and such date.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't really work that way with crowdfunding, unfortunately. That's the nature of the beast.
Yeah. And when I see, it's rare, but people get mad, like, it's a month. They're a month late. Like, what do you mean? Like, that's a month is the publisher's or the printer's fault. You know what I mean? A month is like, there's so much, even in a US based printer, like a month can absolutely be the printer's fault, or like there's little things that come up. And that's why, I don't know, if you're into crowdfunding comics, I think timelines are not, if timelines bother you, maybe crowdfunding comics aren't the best route. I think the best way, like me as a creator, I get it. The best way I can minimize that is by trying to get the book done or as much done ahead of time. That does take a massive risk financially. And so there's that to consider. So that's, when I tried with Downcast 3 to get it done ahead of time, that was a big focus of this campaign. I wouldn't have launched it otherwise because, Fatal's still in process. So, I feel bad about having 2 campaigns, but in this case, it's like it's done. So it's just sitting there.
Right.
But we'll see. I mean, it's a perpetual experiment.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Now, the interesting thing to me, like I wanted to bring up, like you were talking about the different way that you're working on Fatal, the way you and Charlie are working together on that to kind of craft that whole story. So how is that different from the way you're doing Downcast, where that is your story and you are the writer? Are you writing full script, or how are you doing those books?
Yeah, so it's night and day difference. Downcast is full script. However, I'm a big believer in giving artists freedom to add things or change things. And it's always for the best. So the way that I do it is I write full script. I send it to Nacho. I tried to run this one like we were working for a comic book publisher. We had deadlines, and I was writing them in single issue. So it was like issue number, what would be 5, is the first part of Downcast 3. So issue number 5, here's issue number 5. Nacho works on that. He had deadlines. And then that would impose a deadline on myself as well, because he needed the next one afterward. It's like, try to do it like that to very much sort of dial into that, monthly comic book fill, where you had deadlines and you're working, make a cool story. And so it worked really well. Nacho there have been like a few places where I imagine it looking one way and he'll do something completely different that's so much better. And that's like the best part about giving your artist freedom to create how they want to create. But at the same time, it's definitely full script. There's still all the same elements. I'll go in afterward and look at the dialogue. And usually when you see characters that are speaking that dialogue, then you'll find out, maybe this actually kind of has to sound a different way. And so that's where, and it doesn't have anything to do with the art being drawn differently necessarily. It's about seeing the character's face and, again, just how they act. And so then you can kind of be flexible there and make it work. So, but for the most part, I mean, it's the story I set out to write. It's the story I wrote. There are little changes that have made it a better story. But it's been a really fun process. I actually really like this process. It's just so efficient. And that's what was definitely the goal with Downcast 3.
I see Ryan Wynn said in the chat, we did that with Gods and Gears, and it was a really fun experience to go from issue to issue.
Yeah, I'd recommend, even if you're like, let's just say you're just writing and you don't know if you'll ever hire an artist, like writing, thinking of it as, here's 22 pages. Let me write a story in this 22 pages and make it a satisfying issue. Right. That's a different way to think about it, as opposed to, I'm going to do one graphic novel. And it's all cool, but it is, I don't know, it's a fun way to do comics. It's like the tradition of why we're here,
Right. Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Like, that's what comics always were. The thing that we fell in love with when we were reading comics growing up were those 22-page issues that you got, when you went to the store, and that you read that floppy. Like, that was what got you. Then you waited. I can't wait to see what's going to happen next.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. So interestingly, like you mentioned before about doing a series, this is something that some people are doing and some people aren't. Some people like to do just this, like, here's my story. It's got a beginning, a middle, and an end, and then this is it. It's a graphic novel, and we're done. And that's fine if that's the story you're looking to tell. But I think like series is, at least for me, like when I think of comic book, maybe it's just because I'm old, but I think of, comic books. I think of reading issue after issue after issue. And even if that means, you're reading it in a trade, you're still reading it issue by issue. It's just all collected into one volume.
Yeah.
And I feel like the series idea, I know we've had conversations, and I've heard other people have conversations about, I can't wait till we get to the point where we're talking about lore and we're having, nerd conversations about the comic books in CG, and we're talking about that kind of stuff. And I feel like that only happens with series.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I feel very strongly about this, that and again, I'm going to be writing a Dracula story, and that's not going to be a series.
Right.
It is going to be one story. So that, like, I'm not against the existence of books like that, but you're totally right. Like, the reason why Spider-Man is what it is not because of that first issue of Spider-Man was just so great, though it was, and it sold well, but we wouldn't be talking about it if that was it. I really don't think so. It has been the years and years and years of dedication to that character and that story that has made it what it is today. And so, to me, I think, especially with crowdfunding, is you have a shot to build something. This is a foundational kind of thing you're doing. And so, if I really feel strongly that creating a series is how you're going to make something that is bigger than the sum of its parts. So that's primarily what my goal is, and a lot of that is the added risk. Are people going to back the next book? You know what I mean? They're going to stick around, but I actually think it gives people a little bit more confidence in what you're doing. And so I just think if you're considering it and you're not sure, I think if you just commit to it and say, I'm going to do a series, that's the plan. It doesn't have to be a long series, but plan on it being some serialized to some degree. I think you'd benefit, unless your book's not made for it. That happens too. And those can be great books, but
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously, you've got standalone stories are fine. And obviously, I mean, we have those even in mainstream. There are standalone stories that some of them involve those series characters, but it's a standalone story involving them. So that's a little bit of a cheat, but
yeah.
But you can have a great standalone story. It's the same thing with, the difference between movies and television. You have a movie. Some movies are just great in one movie, and that's all you need. You never need a sequel, although Hollywood will always want to make one. But you don't,
unfortunately.
But you don't really need it, but then, you've got television on the other end, where over a bunch of seasons, this whole mythology can be built up, and the characters and relationships and things can happen. And sometimes it goes too long and it becomes a little redundant or just kind of eats itself, which can happen too. I do think like that's one of the things that manga has. And I've been saying this I know everybody's been talking about manga recently, but I've been saying this for years, and you can go back and find old ass videos on my channel where I was recording while I was driving my car with my phone in my pocket, where I would talk about this, where one of the things I always felt like manga had an advantage, and it's the same thing with anime as well. There is a beginning, a middle, and an end. And when it's done, it's done.
Yeah.
And that has an advantage. It has a disadvantage as well, in that you can't just keep going in perpetuity like they would like to do with these characters they have. But when you have an ending, then it's just done, and if it's good forever.
Yeah. And you build to that, which is why to me, like when I thought about series, part of it was Hellboy. And a lot of people know I got really into Hellboy because of the way that he built his universe.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a lot of things you can learn from that. But you'll often hear from Mike Mignola that he knows how it's going to end, or he'd say in interviews, I know how it'll end. It's just getting to that point. And I don't know how long it'll take, because all along the way you get more ideas. You know what I mean? You might add things. And so for me, I want Downcast to be the same way. I roughly know how it's going to end, but and I can guess how long it's going to take me. At the same time, I'm pretty flexible with, if I get more ideas for it, I could add more if that's what people want.
Sure.
But I to me, that's perfect, where you have a series that does have some ultimate endpoint that you're moving toward, rather than just cancellation and reboot.
Right. Well, and that's the thing is, this is another thing I tend to, when I did actually, back in the day when I did talk about Star Wars and stuff like that, one of the things I would say is the big difference between the originals and the prequels and then the new stuff is, regardless of, even if you hate the prequels, that part's irrelevant, like it or dislike it. What it is it's one person's vision throughout that entire thing. And that makes a difference. And so, like you're saying, like with Hellboy, that's Mignola's baby. That's his thing. It's never going to be, unless by some strange turn of events he sells it to someone, which I don't imagine him ever doing. It's going to be his decisions, and it's always his decision on what happens in those stories and what happens with those characters. So maybe he makes a choice you don't like, but you'll, as a loyal reader, when it's that same person that has earned all this goodwill with you because you've enjoyed all these other stories, if they make a choice you don't necessarily love, you'll kind of just stick with it and keep going, because you'll be like, oh, listen, it was his choice. It's his creation. And I've been along for this ride all this time and I've enjoyed all of this. So I'm going to trust them and see where it goes.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And again, like with this YouTube format, people get to know you, and they know, I don't know, like there's maybe even a little bit more of that, where there's this, just commitment to like, let's see it through. Let's see what you're going to do, which has been, I don't know, just, it's humbling to know there's many people out there that are like, yeah, let's build something. That's part of the fun of it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think if you're on the fence, like, don't be afraid of a series. That's what I would say.
Right. It's funny. I had gone back not too long ago, maybe about like 6 months ago or so, and I started reading the old G.I. Joe comics, the original run back from 85, I guess it was.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting, because the reason why I chose to do that was because, like I said, obviously I am working on my own thing. And one of the things I started thinking about was the thing I really want to do. I want it to be a series, but part of me wants, I have this thing in my mind, and again, maybe it's just because I'm old, but I have this thing of like, I want to make a comic book comic book.
Mm-hmm.
like that's what I want. I want to make a comic book that is a comic book. Like, it's not beyond that. It's a comic book. Like, it's
no Netflix pitch.
It's it's not a Netflix pitch. It's not any of that. It's a comic book comic book. And like, if it eventually gets just weird and whatever, who cares? It's a comic book. And the other, like, it's funny because I find myself thinking about different things. And one of the things I was thinking about was comic books back in the day were, especially if you go way back, each issue was a standalone story. And then they would have like some subplots that would carry through. So I went back and I was reading those old G.I. Joe issues, because at least the first, I want to say like the first 6 or 7 were that. They were just standalone issues. And I'm assuming the reason they were like that was because they didn't know if it was going to actually amount to anything.
Yeah.
So they didn't want to commit to any long-term storytelling. And you can see when it changes, because they hit a point where all of a sudden now the story, like there was one like 2-part issue, and then a few more standalones, and then suddenly the story changes and it becomes this ongoing, what we tend to think of when we think of like a Marvel comic.
Yeah.
That ongoing story that just goes on forever. And obviously stories start and stop and things,
Right.
But I had wanted to, because I felt like it had been a really long time since I read a good old fashioned 22-page standalone story comic. So I went back to read those just to kind of inspire myself again on like, you can tell a fun, cool story in 22 pages.
Yeah.
Like you really can.
Yeah, absolutely. And then it can go a couple ways, because if you're adding it to a series, like again, we've all seen multiple times where it's like you've got a story arc that's a bunch of things together, but you'll have that one issue that's in continuity, but not, I mean, it doesn't, it's very much that one issue,
Right.
And it's an interesting challenge, or making the one issue be it. That one issue is all you learn about those characters. And it's funny how comics are unique this way, because the restrictions that you have really affect the format of storytelling. Whereas I came from writing novels, and the difference between 300 pages and 312 pages is nil. Like you're just doing, it's however many pages it takes to tell a story. But in a comic book, it matters, because that costs money.
Right.
So it's like you have to build the story around those restrictions, but that makes for some great stories. When that these are your parameters, get creative within these parameters.
Right. Well, I do feel I've always been a firm believer that limitations drive creativity.
Mm-hmm.
I've always been a firm believer in that. You go back and you look at 8-bit video games, they had so much less technology to work with, and yet the amazing things they were able to do. And I also am a big believer in the audience meeting you halfway. Again, going back to like an 8-bit video game, when you saw like Mario and that little Goomba in the very first, screen of Super Mario Brothers, you knew what it was.
Yeah.
Like your brain fills in anything that's missing.
Right.
Which is actually why it makes it difficult to catch typos, because your brain just fixes them automatically when you read.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's the phase I'm in right now. It's like, do I want to send this to the printer? I want to send it to the printer, but it's like, I gotta let me double check it. So, triple check it, quadruple check.
It's funny. Did you see? I don't know if you saw that cover of that April O'Neil comic, where it's
recent.
Yeah, I just saw it, I think yesterday. Somebody tweeted out the picture of the April O'Neil comic. I don't even think it's out yet, so I think hopefully they have time to fix it. But the cover is I'm not even going to talk about the artwork, because the artwork's terrible, but that's what distracted me. I saw the terrible artwork, and then I realized when I looked up, instead of April, it says Arpel.
Ooh.
It actually is ARPIL.
Oh my gosh.
As soon as I saw it, I was like, wait, what?
So it was like the logo, even?
Yeah, it's the cover. It's the cover of the book.
Wow. Do you think that's designed separately? You know what I mean? Like that's a whole other process, creative process. Like, here's the logo for this mini series we're doing. Approved.
Right.
Then it gets put on the cover. Approved. Then it's
Yeah, you gotta wonder. Like, I always, whenever something like that comes through, I always wonder, like, how many layers did it get through?
Yeah. Well, and I don't. It's like I get nervous about making fun of it too much, because there's but like I've had in Downcast too. There's one typo that was like one of those, the rain. Have you seen like where it's on 2 lines? The rain in Spain, and it's like a duplicate word like that, but it's on a different line, so your brain fixes it. There's one of those, and so I fixed it for the reprint. I'm not going to tell anybody where it is if they don't know, but yeah, something on the cover is like, I hired a editor, and part of it was just the cover layouts. Like, you'll look at these very carefully, because that's the worst kind of typo is on the cover.
Yeah, no, definitely. Like on the cover, like Ryan Wynn said, pull it up. It's hilarious. Yeah, no, I think I saw it on Twitter. But yeah, no, it made me laugh. And like, I understand where you're coming from too. Cause like, I feel like I don't want to like, cause if I make a mistake, like, you know, people make mistakes. Like, you know, it does happen.
But you do get roasted for it.
Sure.
I don't know how else to say it. But like, I remember like, you know, like readers are great because they give you a lot of leeway. At the same time, it's like Downcast 1 came out. I was shocked at how many people reviewed it, and in some cases viciously roasted it. I think in some even smaller cases unfairly viciously roasted it.
Okay.
But that's how it works. You know what I mean? That's the game. And so you just kind of okay. And there's some things you can learn from that for sure. But I'll tell you, for them, hopefully it's that they need a copy editor, you know,
right
before it goes to social media, or print. I can't imagine if they sent it to the printer already. That would be awful.
Well, that's what I'm wondering. Like, I don't know. And if they did, then those issues. What's really funny is we're all making fun of it. We're all laughing about it. But if it does make its way out, and then they end up pulling it and reprinting it with the cover fixed, those ones with the error are going to be worth money someday.
They absolutely, yeah. That's a good point. Now I want an app. What was it? April.
Arple.
I need an Arple cover.
Ryan Wynn says, I'm king of making typos, but the Arple thing was funny.
That is funny. No, it's fair. And these are professional companies too that should.
Right. Well, that's the big difference to me. Like, these are actual companies whose entire business revolves around making comic books. So when they have errors like that, that's a little bit like...
Okay. I just found the cover.
Oh, did you?
Do you want me to share the screen?
Yeah.
This is, I know you're absolutely know what you're saying now too. That's the cover.
Yeah.
Oh, that is bad.
For like, and when I first saw it, I saw the art. The first thing that grabbed my attention was the artwork, and I was like, "Wow, that's a hideous cover." And then then my eyes slowly drifted up.
I'm feeling better about my trading cards, by the way. I don't know why. Suddenly, I'm feeling a little bit better. Yikes!
I haven't even started my artwork for my stuff, and I'm already feeling better.
Yeah, you can do this, people. Yeah. Holy cow! Yeah, that's bad. So that the answer is there was no logo design. This is literally we picked a font that happens to be free and typed it in, and that's it.
Much.
That's someone who doesn't know Command I.
Yeah. Oh man, that's hilarious. It makes it even more. This is such a parody of what comics have become,
right?
Even though it's not, but it's like this low effort cover that even on the interior art would be like, what?
Right?
Like, why? Like super suspicious interior art, but this is the cover. This is the same thing I've been seeing. I mean, it is IDW, but I've been following the Beast Wars series because it should be great, but it's not at all. It's terrible. It's so bad. But just looking at it, it's like, why did they even bother making this? None of this makes sense to me because it's so bad. Yikes.
The funniest thing is somebody else pointed out, I'm shocked she's actually a redhead. Like,
that's a good point. Yeah. Good point. At least the color scheme is almost correct.
Right. And I mean, and listen, and not for nothing, it's $5.99 for this book.
Yeah.
Like,
I think that's $5.99 a bit too much.
You're asking people to pay $6 for that.
Like, man,
my covers that I'm like, I think I have, you know what? Give me 1 second. Because I gotta show you. Like, I'm looking at this and I'm thinking to myself, when I was a kid, anybody who's really been following my channel for a while knows that when I was a kid, I used to make my own comics all the time. I'm sure a lot of people did. And I would draw, I would basically just draw them and make up the stories as I went along. And I'm looking at this cover and I'm just thinking to myself, this is supposed to get people to spend $6. I could reprint one of my books that I made when I was 12 years old and it would look better than this. And those were done on like just whatever paper I could find, and I drew with like a ballpoint pen. Like,
I don't know what's the inspiration for this. That's what I don't understand. I don't know if it's the whole CalArts animation thing, or like I see in the chat, this is basically every YA novel cover. Like, is it like, hey, this style, there's something to it because a cover from a novel looked like this, so let's do a whole comic book like it. I just don't understand where. To me, they're still taking a risk of putting it out, or is they really think they have enough TMNT fans they're just going to buy this because they're completionists? That's what it feels like.
It could be that's what it is they're expecting enough people will spend the $6 cover price to cover whatever rate they paid the person that made this cover. And I don't know what the interiors look like, but this doesn't give me a whole lot of hope.
They got to cover, they got to pay Nickelodeon for the licensing fee.
That's true.
To do this as well. I just like, they have to be riding really close to the wire on this. I don't know.
Ryan Wynn says, how to draw comics the airline instructions pamphlet way. It's crazy to me. Like, I see people complain all the time about a lot of modern covers are essentially just pinups that have nothing to do with the comic book.
Yeah.
And that happens a lot. That happens that happens all the time. But at least a lot of those are still well drawn.
Yeah. It's something you can hang up or put in your long box, at least,
right.
Like it's there. I mean, you could pull it out and you're not going to be shocked,
Like, at least, and it's funny because I don't understand, like, part of me, I don't understand the why they, I do understand why they do it, because they generally have like 14 variant covers for everything, and they, and they also just, it's a matter of just getting a name to do a cover, and instead of having them have to do something that ties into the story, we're just going to have a random, just draw the character standing there, and we'll just put that on the cover. But you remember, literally we just had a joke about it. And I pulled this out on a stream the other day too. I have this sitting right here. Like, in here, there is an entire section devoted to making an interesting cover that will help you to sell the book. How is it that I have that and that is always in the back of my mind?
Yeah, this is I don't know, and I don't know if it's separation from sales. Like, has the industry, they really are relying on the IP to sell. Like, that's what sells the books, and so nothing else matters. And the rest is about economics. How do we make it? We already know X amount of people are going to buy whatever Ninja Turtle stuff we put out. So therefore, now it's about economics. We got to make this cheap. But I'm trying to be like generous. Like, what would be the inside of this story when this is the cover? Right. I imagine a lot of coffee drinking and sitting around tables. Like that's what I'm picturing. The artwork kind of looks. You guys ever read like the Madeline books? I don't. Little French orphan girl. This artwork all kind of reminds me of that. Like, maybe that's what everything looks like on the inside. I don't know, because it's a flat gray background that this is all sitting on. But I don't know. This is again, film industry suffers from maybe some of the same stuff too. Is like, it's the safest. We're gonna sell the IP, and we don't have to deliver on anything, so we're not going to.
It's an interesting thing you brought up when it stops being about creativity and starts strictly being about economics. Then you're working backwards And what you're
Yeah.
doing is you're saying, okay, we know if we sell something with, for example, turtles, we know we're going to make approximately X amount of dollars. So if we want to make, whatever our profit that we think we want to come out of this with, so we're gonna, this is how many we're gonna sell. This is what the license costs us. This is what the printing costs us. The only room to really finagle with anything is in the creative team. So
Yeah.
at some point they go, all right, well, we could hire this person, but what's their page rate? It's this. That's too high. We won't make enough on a return on the investment at that point. So let's find someone who charges less. Let's find an artist who charges less, a writer who charges less, everybody who charges less that we can pay less. And now we've figured out now we've figured out our book, but you haven't figured out your book. You figured out a spreadsheet.
Yeah. Well, like, there's this guy on Instagram that can draw eyes using 3 lines. He copies and pastes it on every single image, and so we can hire this guy. He's going to be really cheap for us. But yeah, to me, it shows that they're not going to, they have no plans in trying to draw readers to the book. It's just off of, if you're an existing reader, here you go. Right. And when people say, oh, the comic book industry is doing great, it's thriving, this is a good example. And I'd love to see inside the book. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they've on to something that's amazing inside, but I don't think so. I doubt it.
I wouldn't have high hopes for that.
Definitely not.
What what it reminds me of, I'm looking at it and it reminds me of, I found this program. I did a video on it for people in case they were interested. It's a free software. It's called Vector, VECTR. It's actually an online app. You can do it through your browser. You don't even have to download anything. And you can make, I use it to make logos. Like I made my ICU logo, the Indie Comics Underground logo, my Smiley Bones logo I made using that. Like, it's cool for making like logos, and it's got a bunch of fonts in there and stuff, and you can do things like that. But I also just futzed around with it because I had nothing to do. So I would just mess around with it. And I made some artwork with it. And it has a very unique look. It's not something I would ever put in a comic book. Because it's not comic book art. That's what this reminds me of, though. You take like basic shapes and you can deform them a little bit, and it's all flat colored. That's what this reminds me of. Like, it just like looks like something that they just did with like flat shapes. They kind of like messed with the points on the lines a little bit to give it a little bit of shape, and then they flat filled it all and they were done.
Yeah. And it could be like a children's book or something. That's what it looks like. But then I'm like, April O'Neil, like how many kids are, I don't know. This doesn't make a lot of sense. I really think it's just, hey, people, we're going to sell X amount of TMNT related stuff. So this is what we're going to do.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely strange. Like I said, it feels like they designed this book backwards.
Yeah.
I think that's probably what they did.
It's interesting though too, because if I was hired, let's pretend I was hired by IDW to write an April O'Neil book, that would almost be the perfect opportunity to nail it. Because you imagine you get this character that's lesser known or lesser popular. It's a side character. Now you have this opportunity, this freedom to do something with this character that could define you as a creator. Right. How many creators have done that throughout comics history? Done fantastic runs on more obscure characters.
Sure.
This is an opportunity like that. And I haven't read it, but I doubt that that's where it's going. But I would think that you'd want to see it like that as an opportunity to do something super cool, and people don't expect it, and everyone's talking about this April O'Neil run, and how would that be? What I mean? What April O'Neil, they crushed this April O'Neil story, and then that's actually really interesting if they did that. But
yeah, no, you're right.
Possible now.
Well, that's how it used to be. People would get put on backup stories, or random characters that nobody really cared about. and then they would turn in some good work and maybe get some attention, and then next thing you know, they're working on the bigger titles.
Yeah, absolutely.
What's funny is this is from Previews, the website. I'm assuming is where you pulled this up.
This was on Twitter, actually.
Oh, okay. Because it looked like it was from like Previews, the web, the Diamond website, which means even their friends over at Diamond didn't catch the typo in the title.
Not a single person. Yeah. It really is amazing. I can't on the cover. Wow.
Right. Yeah, it's one thing, it's one thing inside if there's a little goof here or there, again, is it ideal? No, but it is going to happen from time to time.
At the same time, I was trying to be generous before, but the more I think about it too, it's like, how long has IDW been publishing comic books?
Right.
We're not talking about one creator. We're talking about a company that presumably has editors on staff. You know what I mean? Like, this is they have somebody here that is their one job.
Right.
At least one person, that's their one job.
Right. Exactly. Like, although again, you look at a lot of the stuff that for example, IDW, they've got a lot of these licensed books, and like you were talking about Beast Wars, I know like the GI Joe books, they put out the regular GI Joe book, and then they always have that other book that they put out, and there are times when you just look at that other book especially and just go, what the hell? Like, what were they like? I don't get it. What were they thinking?
And it must have something to be like, we bought the license for 2 books, and so we have to use up the second book, and you know what I mean? Like, they have to make whatever their economics look like. But I say that, but then they're notorious for making terrible financial decisions at IDW. So I don't know.
It's perplexing. I mean, what is it? I think it's like the last 3 years, they've lost money every time. Every year they've had their financial reports, they've lost money, and their basic solution all the time is, we're going to go raise some more capital from some investors, and maybe we'll make movies or something.
Yeah. I don't know. It's strange. I'll never understand it.
That's it. There's another thing that's been going around in my head, and I've been thinking about it, so I'll pick your guys' brains on it while we're here. I was thinking about this before, and we were talking about doing a series and how people will come along on the series and all that kind of thing. One of the things I've been thinking about, and this used to happen. Now, you tell me if this used to happen to you. Back when a superhero movie would come out, right? Or a superhero TV show or whatever it might be, something would happen, and your friends or your family or whomever who knew that you were into superheroes, into comic books, would go to you and say, is that how it happened in the comic?
Yeah.
like that would happen, right? That always happened. And you would say, well, not exactly. And then you'd go through like the ridiculous, like 15 other steps that were involved in the story that they just eliminated for time, or because they didn't have the rights to the characters that were involved, or whatever it might be. And, that was always the way, but it was always understood that the movies exist. Yes, they're there, whatever. But the real story of those characters is what happens in the comic books. So, that's the real story. The rest of this is all just, hey, we're just making something. And at some point along the way, that's changed. When you talk to people now, the real story, when you talk to a lot of people now, they don't even ask what happened in the comic book. They just assume what they've seen in the movies is now the real story. And honestly, when you compare the amount of people that are reading the comics versus the amount of people who see the movies, if you're just going by the way legends work, which is the amount of people telling a story over and over again to one another, then the movies are the real story at that point.
I hadn't considered that, but you're right. And the comics industry probably agrees, because they will specifically change things to get out of the way of the movies,
Right.
or you know what I mean? So it's even down to like character designs like Harley Quinn,
Yes.
or Superman I've been seeing without the red, you know what I mean? He looks more like the movie. Like that's a really good point. That movies are now leading the way.
Yeah, these characters that were created in comics, that were made legendary in comics, are now no longer defined by the comics to the public at large, and that's why I laugh when I see a lot of times there's these stories of, hey, we made so-and-so this, it's canon now. Like you always get that, like the taunting, like with oh God, what was it? Star-Lord. They all hate Chris Pratt because, God forbid he goes to church and he does nice things, and we can't have that. So so they go after him, and so the way they go after him, like rotten little children, they make the character whatever they made him. I don't even know. Did they make him bisexual or pansexual or whatever they did?
Yeah,
and it doesn't even matter. Like whatever they did something. And they're like, we made it canon now. Ha ha. Like, no, you really didn't. Because if it doesn't happen in the movie, no one's going to know.
Yeah.
Because no one's reading the comics anymore. And the comics aren't the lead.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good point. I hadn't considered, but it's true. I mean, and every time they justify it by saying, well, we make comics that they'll make movies out of someday, they're feeding into the same thing, that you're not the real, this is not the stage. This is R&D, that you're going to move to a screen, hopefully someday.
Right. That's their dream, is that one day it will be turned into something. And then they'll end up just like the people we've seen complaining whose stuff was turned into movies about how they got no money from it. So,
yeah.
But it struck me. And the reason why that whole thing kind of struck me was I saw a statement from Robert Kirkman. Now I would say is obviously he's wildly successful. But he's probably a closer thing to what we are all trying to be. He's the guy. He makes his own stuff. He owns it all. It's his vision. It's his thing, But what I find really interesting with him, and I don't know, maybe I'm the only one who cares about this. I don't know. But when The Walking Dead, the show came out, I was like super hyped for that because I read the comic and I absolutely loved it, and I plowed through it. Like I got every like trade, and I plowed through all the trades real quick, and then I caught up and I was reading monthly after that, and and I was telling my wife like how insane this book is and like how crazy everything is, and then when this show was coming, I'm like, you got to watch the show. Like the story is just incredible. Like you're gonna go nuts when you see the stuff that happens in this thing.
Yeah.
And then we watched the show, and the show was so different from the book that I immediately was just done. Like with halfway through the first season, I was out. And, she didn't know any better, but she honestly thought the show was boring. So we both noped out, and that was the end of it.
Yeah.
But I find it funny because Kirkman himself helped write the show.
Right.
And I always found it weird. And now this brings me to another thing is obviously Kirkman also did Invincible, which again, I loved the comic, and he did the animated show, which I haven't even watched, to be truthful. It didn't look like spectacular to me. The animation was okay. I don't know. It just didn't grab me for whatever reason. And I love the comic, but I have the comics. I've read the comics. I don't need to see it again, especially if it's going to be different. And from everything I'm hearing, he changed the story again. Now they're saying they're going to do a live action Invincible. I don't know if it's supposed to be a movie or a series. And again, he said he's going to change the story. So I have this weird thing. And like I said, maybe it's just a weird fixation of mine. And I don't know. That's why I'm asking you guys what you think. So for example, Invincible, if you've had the comic book, the animated series, and now you're going to have whatever this new project is, and all three of them are going to have different stories. What is the story of Invincible?
I mean, so initially I would want to say the comics, like that, the source material.
Right.
But I think you're right especially in the moment that the comic books are there to serve the other media. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like the moment they're doing that, then they're a pitch, or they're
Right.
something else. I would imagine. Yeah, I don't know. Like that's crazy because you'd think Lord of the Rings, there's the novel. That's Lord of the Rings.
Right.
Like then there's adaptations of the novel.
Yes.
But these are not adaptation, or they're sort of moving away from that, and it's the movie, and this is basically pre-production of the movie, or whatever else there is. So I don't know. That's interesting. I have to get going.
Yeah, no problem.
But I really appreciate you having me on tonight. Good discussion, and yeah, really appreciate it. So thank you.
Yeah, of course, no problem. Thank you for being here. So we'll wrap it up right there.
Okay.
It was just,
sorry.
Yeah, no, it's all good. It's all good. I don't mind. Sometimes because I could just keep going and going and going. So I don't mind if somebody's like, listen, I gotta go.
It's all good. I hear my wife out there. I'm like, okay, I need to go.
Yeah. So thank you, Clint, for being here. Links down below for Downcast 3, Submerged, and Fatal, both down there. You can check them both out. Also, link for RC's YouTube channel, I believe, is down. I hope it's down there. I usually put it down there.
Even if it's not, I'm not going to raise a fuss about it.
And yeah, don't forget to tune in. Usually every Tuesday at 7 p.m. we do the best ever, which is a fun stream. We just talk about a bunch of stuff. I'm not going to be on for the next 2 weeks. I'm going on vacation. So I'll be kind of MIA for the next couple of weeks. I'm going to try and record some videos so I have some stuff going up while I'm away. But yeah, that's that. Don't forget to check out Indie Comics Underground. Thank you to everybody in the chat. Thank you to everybody who stopped in, popped out, all that good stuff. Anybody who watches the replay, don't forget to give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down, whatever. I don't care. And if you're not subscribed, please subscribe, and we will talk to you guys again soon. And I'm going to do it with the left hand again, so I got to make sure I